There we go. Coming up right now. And of course, with that being the case, I will do my thing as I always do when we're going live to YouTube. Our little studio audience here today of our syndicate members that decided to come in and crash the party in March of 2021. And we're talking about hospitality. In fact, the shifts in hospitality for 2021 and beyond. And of course, I'm your host, Mitch Kamich, the savage in business, the architect, the maestro for Syndicate itself and the business empire that we're here riding shotgun with me today is my right hand man, Darth Vader, to me being the emperor. And that is my brother from another mother, Matt Hewson, as well. So we're talking about hospitality. Hospitality meaning what? Meaning food service, food and beverage, maybe even a little bit of hotel, etc. Right? But we're going to talk about the things that make life richer and better. And I think we can all agree in the midst of a pandemic, we're probably ordering, thanks to this thing, a lot more food being delivered to our house than ever before. In fact, I will admit to having the same delivery driver from Skip the Dishes come to my house twice in the same day. And the guy pulls up the second time, is like, "What up?" And I'm like, "It's good to see you too." Right? So even that has changed an awful lot thanks to the pandemic. But because of that, we're going to cover a couple of topics really quick. I'm going to get some feedback from Matt here shortly, and we're going to dive right into this, and we're going to maximize up to the next 50 minutes. First of all, food and beverage, food service. Two of the oldest industries in the world are what? Prostitution and restaurants. In fact, one of the oldest restaurants and comestibles or domestic houses for use by travelers is recorded back almost 7,000 years ago. We have documented record keeping in China of an actual place facility, not just serving food to travelers, but providing custom, meaning a roof over their head and food and board for them to stay, temporary lodgings, and a meal so that they didn't have to sleep out under the stars or find somebody that would take them into their home. We have a history for thousands of years where we have always had the need to eat and the need for shelter, of course. And amongst us, whether we are talking tribal custom, we are talking semi-nomadic, whether we are talking civilized, industrialized, postmodern, future in and after a pandemic as well, the need to eat, the need for shelter is part of the primary goal and purpose that we have in life. And yet, because we travel nomadically, now in our modern world, for work, for pleasure, for entertainment, for family, etc., it becomes important to do what? Find a place to eat and find a roof to put over your head so that it can be just like home. And when we spend so much time inside of our own homes, thanks to a pandemic, it makes those moments even more so. Business travel is down an awful lot, still important. Personal travel is down an awful lot, still important. And people are finding ways to vacation, staycation, get away, etc. Or what are they doing right now, thanks to other portions of the industry inside of hospitality, using other people's homes for vacations, respite work, etc. So hospitality, due to 2021, has accelerated, sped up, changed, massively transformed. And there are some key indicators that we want to talk about there as well. And more importantly, some resources for people to be able to take away. So first of all, hospitality, primarily food and beverage industry. What is its relevance right now in a pandemic environment in that post? Relevant for post-pandemic world. What should restaurants be looking at? What should food and beverage be looking at? How should they be looking to adapt and adopt? We're seeing some of it right now. We'll talk about a little bit of that here. How to make it more attractive for not just today, but tomorrow's traveler and consumer. What's going to allow for greater eyeball symmetry and energy, etc. And then, of course, support for those entrepreneurs, for those people that want to innovate, those people that look to use food as the medium to transact business. After all, there's nothing nobler than putting food in someone's belly. It is an act of kindness. It is an act of charity. It is an act of love. It is an act of selfless giving. When we used to take people into our homes by custom, even complete strangers, what would we do? We would feed them from our tables. We would shelter them with our own roofs. Well, this has a business. That business has a cost, and it's okay to get paid when you do it. That's something important to look at. So, Matt, we're in 2021. Food and beverage has absolutely changed. I've got a couple of thoughts as well, but let's get your take on it. By the way, listen to us, don't listen to us, but here's some of the background we've got as well. Right? I'm talking about myself for a second. He's talking about himself, and then we're going to get his perspective on where we're at right now. former corporate trainer with Starbucks. I've worked with dozens of franchise and restaurant models. I have an entire consultancy side that works specifically inside of food and beverage and restaurants called Brewbeard Coaching. And our consulting team stretches out all over the globe. We work with some of the biggest brands in North America from a restaurant perspective, from small implementation, in other words, just hiring and training staff to man the floor, to full-scale multi-unit rollout and development. And of course, there's Matt, who is even more impressive than that. Matt, why don't you give a snapshot of why our audience should listen to you?
Well, thanks, Mitch. And realistically, it would be this. If you want to listen, please do. If not, that's on you as well. Just a little bit of my background is that first job at 13 was in food and beverage. It was at a fantastic US-based chain called Bonanza Family Restaurant. So I don't know how many people are as long in the tooth as I am. Mitch, maybe with that gray in the beard, you remember, the salad bar and all those things. But I've been able to be fortunate to work with some great teams. I've worked with the Outback Steakhouse group. I've worked with the Hard Rock Cafe group. And then I was really, really grateful to plug into the Original Joe's restaurant and bar group. And I helped them kind of build the brand in the early 2000s. So, from here on out, it's going to be about what we've done in the past. In the pandemic, obviously, the world is changing. We're going to discuss probably post-pandemic as well and what we should expect from a consumer plus an entrepreneur if you're still wanting to be in the food and beverage industry. But I look forward to the chat and the conversation, Mitch. So thank you.
Absolutely. So buckle up. We're gonna expedite. We're gonna make sure this time is incredibly valuable to you as well. And we'll start with the basic premise of where we sit today. Food and beverage restaurant is one of those industries that has been hit hardest thanks to the pandemic. And across the world, you can get very different pockets, epochs, or even periods of where restaurant food service has been untapped, unheard, unmanned. But to the largest extent, what we see, and if you take just North America itself as a good indicator or an example, except for notable exclusions inside of the pandemic, state of Florida, for example, which did almost nothing from a statewide and a state agency or government level to call, stop, or slow down the pandemic. In other words, the state government for Florida said that we're not going to take any of the kinds of measures. We're not going to enforce masks. We're not going to enforce stay-at-home orders. We're not going to do those other things. We're going to let the population and just hope we see what's going on. So in a place like Florida, for example, not an awful lot changed for food and beverage. People still went to work. People still went to school. People still went to restaurants. They went to bars and nightclubs, went to hotels, went on vacation and stuff like that. And, not a dialect on what happened with the pandemic or not, but weirdly or unweirdly or whatever you want to take away from it, Florida is sitting about the middle of the pack for all of the states of the United States. All 48 continental states. It's sitting right about 23rd, I think it was, as of yesterday, for actual cases, which means they chose to do nothing and they aren't the worst off. They're not the best, but they're not the worst off. Make of that what you will. But they're one of the notable exceptions because they did nothing, which means none of their industry, none of their businesses, none of anything, including food and beverage, changed primarily. So they're standalone. They're unique. They're on a pedestal by themselves. But everywhere else in North America, 47 other states in the United States, 10 provinces, 3 territories in Canada as well, did some form of management, government mandated and based, whether it was temporary, far stronger restrictions than based on municipalities, et cetera, started to do that. So the landscape we've got in food and beverage right now is there was an awful lot of restriction. If we go back a year and we're in March of 2021, we go back to March of 2020 in our marketplace in greater Alberta and in and around the Edmonton area, as an example. Food and beverage primarily shut down last year in March. In fact, many restaurants closed for 6, 7, 8 weeks at a time. 2 months of closing time in what is our current marketplace, a period that is usually the start or ramp up to the busy season. Summer and patio season is incredibly important in our marketplace in Alberta. Why? It's warm weather. People sit in the patio. They want to meet friends. They want to meet coworkers. They want to take their family out. People go away on vacation, etc. These become the social spots because we've been cooped up and cramped up inside with winter. Winters get bitterly cold here. And yes, you still go to restaurants and order food and that, but it's not quite the same as when a spring or summer weather rolls in and you can go sit in a patio. There's something beautiful about patio and a pint of beer and a good meal with good company. Let's say on a Friday afternoon, if you had a busy business week, and just being able to break bread amongst good people. So that disappeared for at least 6, 7, or 8 weeks. And then there were multiple chains, both larger scale, where you would think that perhaps a financial structure, et cetera, would allow them to absorb more impact, were closed for even longer. In fact, there were major box chains or major food and beverage retailers that stayed closed for months and months during the pandemic, that showed that adaptability inside of what they were trying to do was not very high. And yet what we watched from March last year to today is the number of restaurants that made significant changes to the way they deliver service, the way they deliver food, and the way that more importantly they help or provide custom to their customers, evolved and adapted. And even in the midst of a pandemic, you actually watched the advent or launch of other ones. So if we take food and beverage for a moment and get Matt's perspective, you saw big and small retailers, food retailers, pause for sometimes an extended period of time. You watched as they reopened. And by the way, we've had the equivalent of 3 significant lockup or lockdown or slowdown or go home periods in our marketplace in the last year as well. And every time food and beverage was one of those industries that they didn't get beat up because of it, but because of the nature of food, people coming in, handling utensils, touching cups and glasses, and compressing into places. It was an industry that got squeezed quite a bit simply because of the nature of the way the business works. So in that year, we watched both big and little start to cramp down, slow down, and in some cases not even come back, which meant that the financial structure and the stability of those businesses was always in question. The pandemic didn't cause their demise. It accelerated it to some extent. Then you watch some retailers that kind of waited it out and reopened. And then you saw some that adapted, some that opened up brand new, or some that started to make changes with, institution ideas like ghost kitchens, for example, where you have one restaurant running all by itself, and it's almost like another restaurant's running right inside of them. Maybe it's the same restaurant, the same group, different kitchen, different idea. A notable example, without mentioning a name here, is a wonderful noodle and Asian fusion food restaurant where they sell noodle bowls and rice bowls, and you get soup and all sorts of fun stuff like that. They've got this ghost kitchen concept on the side that is nothing but chicken wings and poutine. Every one of their restaurants has another one, and the only way you can find it is online. The only way you can find it is one of those great apps you can order food, and you don't even realize, because they don't advertise the address, that the Chinese noodle place or the Japanese noodle place or the Indonesian noodle place or the Vietnamese noodle place is also the place where you're getting your chicken wings and your poutine at 11 o'clock at night when you decide you need a carbohydrate fix, right? You just got to load up on greasy food, and it's coming from the same people that earlier today probably sold you a rice bowl for lunch. You're seeing some of these trends and change. Now, with that in mind, Matt, what have you watched happen for the last year? What have you noted that's coming in right now? What are some of the errors that we've certainly seen inside of that food and beverage side? And more importantly, we watched some adaptation and innovation happen. I think it's really cool to bring some of that out, of course, because that's incredibly helpful for people, because it's time for people to learn to do things differently.
Well, absolutely, Mitch. And what I've found is, talking with some of my clients and even some of my peers, is that it's the larger chains that, they are a big ship and it's hard to steer and to adjust quickly. Whereas some of the local, smaller retailers, like you had just mentioned, were able to pop up. And, one of the biggest tools for them now is how does the menu look pre-COVID, pre-pandemic versus how it looks now? And many of them have had to adjust and change because it needs to be able to travel, right? So gone are the days of having a big plate of nachos with beer watching your Oilers game, because that menu item doesn't travel well, right? So they're not worried, they're concerned that the quality of product needs to be there. They want to retain integrity of their brand, certainly, and because of that, some of the items that may have been their top tier and one of their icons would needed to move away, right? So that was definitely one thing that we've seen. Obviously, the delivery services have seen a ramp up. So the relationships that you have with it, and if they were a multi-unit restaurant or outlet, obviously just being able to retract, close down multiple locations, and actually just provide the delivery service through one, obviously offsetting some of those hard costs and expenses, right? So, many of them are now promoting, again, a group setting, but socially distanced. So, those tasting nights or Zoom dinners or whatever it may be, where multiple people can order at the same time. And then all of a sudden you kind of have that evening out, but in, right? So that was great. And, I loved seeing that from some of our smaller communities here. Obviously, with many of the restaurants, specifically I'm from Alberta, so there were multi-units, there were large entities. Many of them will have to start looking at scaling back because, a 7,000, 8,000, 12,000 square foot restaurant, maybe with some private rooms for larger private engagements, are no longer relevant right now. Obviously, post pandemic, we hope that obviously those large groups, those conferences, those luncheons come back. But right now, it's just underutilized space. So how can they repurpose and obviously offset some of those costs as well? I'm excited to see as we kind of move past this, through this, how the conference centers, the weddings, trade shows, even the music festivals, charity galas, those are all part of the F&B industry that, from an arm's reach, really suffered because, it wasn't just people walking through the door to the restaurant, right? It was the fact that they weren't able to do a wedding for even 50 people or 100 people, or catering services, or those music festivals that had the food trucks, or some of the local entrepreneurs out there. That was something that really short term obviously crippled the industry and some of those local providers, but longer term I think they're going to see some tremendous support because of it too.
So a couple of thoughts along what you just said right now, because it's reminded me that I've got a retailer very close to me, a box chain, a big box chain that we've got, food and beverage service, great pub feel, great style, great big steins of beer, everything you talked about to start with. Plate of nachos does not transport very well, right? A box of chicken wings, well, yeah, it can transport pretty well, but we don't use styrofoam anymore, right? So how do you accommodate for that? What do you do with beer, etc.? They closed down much like everybody else did back in March last year. But then they changed what they did because they'd always had a delivery side. And so talking with the general manager, because I'd like to talk to an awful lot of people do, talking to the general manager probably about June or July last year, so about 3 months into the pandemic, his exact words to me were, "You know what, Mitch? We are at about 60% of our staffing capacity right now. At that point, they were only open for pickup or delivery. They still weren't open for any seating at all inside of the restaurant." He goes, "Every weekend, we are breaking our sales record from our opening weekend 4 years ago." Because they moved to adapt and adopt very, very quickly. It was something they had already where you could pick it up, and the delivery services like we have in Canada, for example, Skip the Dishes, etc., DoorDash, whatever it is, and down in the States we've got others as well. Those were not in place yet, so you could always order food, always pick it up. They'd bring it out to your car, etc. Because of that alone, and then adoption inside of Skip the Dishes as an example, very quickly, they started to actually increase their sales, and yet their operating cost and expenses when it came to their people side was a lot lower because of it. Another notable big box retailer that we've got here closed for 4 entire months, but when they reopened after, what was interesting to note is, while they've still never included delivery, things like Skip the Dishes, etc., and we are talking retail spaces where it's 4,000, 6,000, 8,000, 10,000, 11,000 square feet of seating space, high-end dining, in the steak environment, etc. They spent those entire 4 months working inside of their own test kitchens and working with their executive chefs. And what did they come up with? The exact same menu, so good quality food, but they changed the way they packaged and presented. In fact, it's some of the finest packaging I've seen for takeaway food on the entire market, where your food stays warm from end to end. They sourced the right kind of recyclable, reusable containers, the right kind of tinfoil double layered that holds and retains heat. Right down to these little tiny moisture wicking pads that they put in with food, because it's steak and you got a potato and you got vegetables and all these other things, and you got dip and other accompaniments that go in there, or et cetera, goes in there, sucks up all the meat juices so nothing gets soggy. Like, it was extraordinary. They spent 4 months looking at how they deliver what they did so they can go back to it. And yet right now, every one of these large stores is still closed, shuttered, except for takeaway. But now what they have is a full kitchen staff and a manager and a customer service rep turning food away. And even the process of coming in and picking up from their parking lot has moved, so that adaptation started to happen in some cases, and others it didn't. And you still see those same struggles. It's almost like people are going a year later, I want to wait and do this. We've watched even some of that with a major event like Christmas. Canadian Thanksgiving is in October. American Thanksgiving is in November. Watching 2 Thanksgivings, watching a Halloween process, watching a return to school in September where kids went back to public school or had a choice to online learning. To have a major event like Christmas and New Year's, et cetera, where we couldn't meet and break bread, where we couldn't go to restaurants, et cetera. And yet we watched some that did notable adaptations. So what were some of those adaptations you watched? And it was interesting to note the number of families that talked about having a really nice meal via Zoom or Skype or FaceTime on their iPhones or whatever it is, right? Or Facebook Messenger. They broke bread. I mean, that's how I ate Christmas dinner with my family. I ordered dinner for everybody. So same restaurant ordered the same meal for everybody, let them pick, had it all delivered to everybody's home, and then we all ate a meal together. What have you noted about that? Because that is notable and noticeable for the post-pandemic, because it could be tomorrow or it could be another 2 years where we're like this, and that spells a new reality, not a wait or a pause.
Right. And early on, again, moving back now over a year, many individuals, many small retailers were thinking, oh no, we're going to get swallowed up because the big guy is going to be able to weather this storm. But what I found now and over the past, 6, 7 months is that because of, again, being able to adapt and adopt faster at the local scale, and like you had just mentioned, put in place some of these new, more artistic plating scenarios or whatever it may be, the big guys can't do that because of course there's supply chain, there's all these things that they have in place. So they move a little bit slower. So I've actually found that the local restaurateurs have been able to elevate and really, create a point of difference here. And I'm excited, I'm, being a foodie, I'm quite excited to see what has come out of it, because realistically, we've done this. Everyone's going to be safer and cleaner. Everyone's far more efficient. And even with some of these big box stores, people will talk about pizza because it's just always a thing that has been able to be put into a box and delivered well, right? Our family just ordered locally here, and I do not lie, it was 11 minutes from when we hit send to when the doorbell rang with this contactless delivery. 11 minutes. So to me, the instant gratification that happens in the world of today obviously is helping to be facilitate with some of that. Now, we need to make sure that we're not setting unrealistic expectations. So good for them. And I would say their name, but I won't on this call. That said, many of the smaller independents here are also doing that. And they've adopted, a third-party deliverer, or they've done it internally to help with some staffing. Obviously, they're not able to staff at 100% because they're not open. So, in order to help offset, instead of dehiring or having to let go of some staff, they've just created a new profile for them, right? Or a new job description, which I think is also going to be a win. But yeah, moving past this, and again, I don't want to think that it's just going to be over anytime soon. But as we're able to, increase the overall capacities in dining room, I'm excited because again, the door swings will increase. Everyone again is going to be in this new type of environment. Like I at a local market have helped some restaurateurs do almost a complete renovation of their space to rework the brave new world that we live in, right? Not just with a plexiglass wall that's temporary. It's just, what, maybe people will want a little bit more space, and because of that, we'll do this. They're going to be able to make up some of that lost income in dining room with the increase in the delivery service that has been forced upon us, right? So that's also something that I'm excited for. Plus, like you mentioned, kind of the associations or the partnerships that have come out of this, right? All of a sudden you have a domestic style food being produced in an ethnic restaurant or whatever it may be. So there's many things that have been happening that now have been highlighted as a great opportunity and more so almost a need, right? So if we can now at the local, obviously support local, yes, but also utilize, some cost savings initiatives, right? So there's some strategies put in place now specifically through restaurant associations and with others where, again, if they can help decrease their fees, their utilities, their this, their that, their whatever, let's try and help them as a community with that as well. So if there's partnerships that can be created with it, let's do it. And like I said, I'm looking forward to how I live in Edmonton, how the Edmonton food industry is going to elevate because of it. And I'm curious to see how the big box stores catch up and if they're relevant, which to many it's just comfort food. It's easy, but I love the fact that we're supporting these small local individuals and entrepreneurs more. And, I'm now looking to see how, the casinos, the hotels, and some of their food and beverage outlets also play a little bit of catch up.
That's, what, I want to dive into that in a moment, because we're really I think we're getting very succinct on that, relevant for post-pandemic world. In other words, the way we're watching the reality of what's going on, right? Attractive to tomorrow is more about adaptation, adoption, et cetera, and then supportive for entrepreneurs and innovation. You've touched on that. But I've got two quick thoughts, and then I'm going to dive right into attractive for tomorrow's traveler and the consumer as well. One, the fast food retailer with the clown as a corporate icon. That's about as close as I'll come to mentioning which company it is. And you're right on speed of delivery. Uh, we are, my wife and I are at home. We've got 4 kids. We got 2 at home, 2 big ones that are off in the world making their way or whatever it is. So there are days where sometimes you just need, 1, food to come into the house, and 2, everybody needs to do a little bit of carb loading. You feel better when you've got something heavy sitting in the bottom of your stomach. And so the business with the clown as the icon is obviously the way to go when you got little kids. They love it, makes them feel better, and nothing quite better than a cold, refreshing Coke coming out of that waxy cup, right? Nothing better than that. 18 minutes. You said 11 minutes from around the corner from your house. It would have taken me more time to drive there, pick up the food, and come back than the amount of time it took for somebody to bring my food to me. I ordered it, and in fact, the little counter said 18 minutes, and the dude arrived in 17. I couldn't have driven there and come back in that time. Never mind having ordered food, etc. So, the technology in the 21st century, we think of this as innovative. This is not new in other areas of the world. I'll take a global perspective for a moment. Food delivery, food service, and have an expediency and immediacy. We think of, let's say Pan Asia, for example, Indonesia, anywhere along the Pacific coastline, right there. You get Indonesia, you get Korea, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We tend to think of these, but the level of technological sophistication is usually much higher than ours, usually much more culturally developed than where we are at right now. And when it comes to things like this, food service is also far more plentiful, right? There are a lot more small business retailers serving food, in a trailer in front of a building than there are anywhere else in the world, which means that if you're hungry right now, within 5 minutes, you can be eating. We think of it as innovative because, the clown can deliver food to my house in 18 minutes, or you get a pizza delivered to your house in 11. But elsewhere in the world, it's like, well, I could always get food outside my door in 5 minutes. Yeah. Imagine the feeling or the impact you would have walking out your front door right now and walking back in 5 minutes later with a hot meal that you had nothing to do with. It's extraordinary to think that we're like, wow, technology has certainly bridged this gap for us, but it's not the same everywhere else in the world. So we're really trying to play catch up. And with that in mind, and playing catch up technology wise, but when it comes to the way food service should adapt, and I'll launch a softball in there for you. Excuse me. Attractive to tomorrow's traveler, attractive to tomorrow's consumer. In other words, where we should be going to. I'm watching another big box retailer, spins pizzas for a living, starting to move from larger footprint, sit down dining centers to what used to be the mandate or the lifeblood of most standalone single or sole proprietor pizza joints, that 1,100 square foot bay in a 1-story strip mall where there was the one dude that sat out front all night with his car idling, waiting for a pizza to get rung up. And then you would grab that pizza, jump in his car, and 10 minutes later, deliver it to your house, take the money, come back to the store, and wait for the next order to come on the phone. Well, now the order doesn't come on the phone, except that it comes on this phone, right? It comes on this one. We use your thumbs. You press the submit button. And then instead of having one dude parked out in front, it's whoever happens to be closest on, Skip the Dishes, DoorDash, whatever it is, starts to bring that food for you. So, but what makes that change? Because we're talking big box pizza chain retailer for years, and you'll know what it is. It's got the red roof. They had the really cool plastic cups in the 80s and 90s. You got the pop from endlessly. They had pizza buffet on Friday nights. You know which one I'm talking about. They've started to move from a sit-down dining room space where they'd have 3,800 square feet to sit in to 800 or 1,100 square feet with a countertop and a pizza oven and a staff and hooked up to delivery service, which means they went, this is too much overhead. We need this to continue not only survive, but thrive and grow. So what do we do, or what do they do from today to March of 2022 and 2023 and 2024 to make that change?
Yeah, and I actually have a couple of notes here. It's smaller spaces are obviously going to become, or shared spaces are going to become more of the commonplace, right? Because again, we unfortunately were forced to kind of create new habits and to do things differently. So Now, although I'm a very social person, I love going out, I love supporting local and shaking hands. I enjoyed that during my time as an owner, operator, franchisee, franchisor. Now it's going to be about how do we produce an experience, whether or not it's not just in-house, but at your house as well, right? So definitely smaller or shared spaces, certainly. And again, you can speak specifically about, the big red roof and others. They're now co-branded, right? There might be one or two like-minded restaurants or under the same larger entity, larger umbrella, right? So that may happen here at a local partnership level as well, where even many of the small business meetings obviously changed as well, and even the solopreneur and the students that were forced to kind of come back home couldn't even go and get their free Wi-Fi from the local coffee shop because the doors were locked, right? So many of those solopreneurs had to make sure that their at-home presence was much stronger. So because of that, they were just ordering this or ordering a pod style coffee or coffee type beverage, right? So those are things that, again, over a course of now a year, again, here locally, some of us have changed our habit, right? Like it's no longer about going to that local coffee shop for the same half calf, a decaf of oat milk of this and that and the other with 13 variables. It's just simply, I'm throwing this pod in and I'm going to add my own milk, right? So those are also going to be changes that we're going to probably see a menu go from 40 items to 20, right? And just be really good at those base offerings. Here's who we are now, and make it more cost effective just from a SKUs and a menu item and ordering as well. So those type of things are going to be a great opportunity for us. I get overwhelmed if I have to go into a local grocery store and pick out orange juice because there's like literally 100 types of orange juice. I just want it to taste like an orange. And if there's pulp, I'm okay with it, right? So I think you're going to see a lot of food and beverage outlets be similar to that. We now have a burger, but we're not going to have 13 different types of burgers. It's going to be 4, right? And what you'll also maybe notice, and I've seen this here locally too, is they've now, in order to create frequency, because that was a big piece of what we tried to do with the brands that I worked with, is that, Edmonton has almost 1 million people, but there's only so many times that we can't create more people. But if we can see them more often, then obviously that will help increase our income, right? So things like meal service or food prep, right? Like I myself get a weekly box with some pre-made and pre-packaged food and meals, because again, we still want to support local. We're unable to go and get all the ingredients ourselves, and why not, right? So these chefs are now becoming like these meal prep wizards, and what again it's doing is that now I'm eating their food 5 days a week, right? Mm-hmm. Pre-pandemic, I might have only gone there once or twice a week, maybe once personally with family and with my kids, and the other one as a business meeting. Well, now we're eating it 5 days a week, which when those doors open and those floodgates open, now I'll be like, well, wait a minute, I need to be there and I need to be more frequently. So that's, again, a huge win for these markets right now. And, just thinking, again, post-pandemic, we're going to see everyone just come out and support and sit on a patio and maybe order an extra beer or order another coffee and invite friends out when we're allowed. And I'm looking forward to that. But one of the things that we've kind of highlighted with some of our strategy is that we're going to be going out often for the first 100 days, and then we're going to pick our favorite, and that favorite is being defined now, right? Yeah. So we may not go out 5 days a week for a business meeting. We may do it once or twice, and we're not going to pick 5 different places. We're going to go to our top 2, right? So you need to be top of mind. You need to make sure that the product is there and available. But you also just need to now create the habits for us as consumers to just be in the house rather than us being your restaurant, right?
So making it attractive, and as well, this goes into our third topic for the day. And I see our other brother, Ali, has joined the call. Ali, we're going to get you to dive in here shortly when it comes to market. Brother, it's good to see you as always. But I want to stay on this one for a moment and then dovetail over into that innovation side, giving some things. You mentioned some parts that has reminded me what other retailers are doing right now, but I want people to think of it as a list. This is not just talk about, hey, I've seen this. Well, we've all seen some really cool stuff, but it's takeaways, key indicators and takeaways. So you mentioned something about changes in our buying habits first. Absolutely. When I think of the Green Mermaid, where I used to get my coffee all the time, I had a noted because I used to work for the Green Mermaid once upon a time as a trainer. I helped develop and grow stores with that chain, that organization as well. But when I think of pre-pandemic, my Green Mermaid coffee habit cost hundreds of dollars a month without prevaricating or inflating. I used to have an internal budget that sometimes would stretch to the 300, 350, $400 a month range. And that was just how frequently I would go 2 or 3 times a day. I would hold meetings there. I would spend many hours. There are many of the Green Mermaid stores where I'm like the king. I would walk in and every staff member who knew who I was and knew exactly where I would sit. And there were places where I used to go with the Green Mermaid where I would walk in, sit down, flip open my laptop, and without asking, they would come over and drop my coffee and my breakfast. And then they would pick up my phone, take it away, and scan it. So I didn't even actually participate in the retail transaction of food and beverage. They would literally go pay themselves for what was going on. And it felt pretty good to be treated like that. Those days are gone because we have adapted, changed, adopted. We will go to drive-through, we'll scoot in and out for a coffee again or breakfast or whatever it is. But if I could stay on the Green Mermaid as well, good adoption, making changes, and the pandemic has accelerated. But the Green Mermaid did it 15 years ago. When what they watched, and this is good takeaway for people right now, your lifeblood, and some of the smartest restaurant innovators and thinkers in the world talk about this consistently, is that loyal customers are going to buy multiple times from you. Single customers getting brand new customers, it's like, man, I got to spend money on advertising, I'm going to market or whatever it is. Well, statistically speaking, you're not going to have somebody return to your restaurant until they get to the third visit. Retention on the first visit is 20%. So 1 in 5 stay. The rest come, try once, and leave. So you spend an enormous amount of money getting those 5 people in to have 1 come back. But if you can get somebody to stay past the third time, there's 80% retention. And that's long-term statistics inside of food and beverage in North American market. Numbers may vary based on marketplace. So what the Green Mermaid decided to do was that instead they watched people coming in the morning, but people weren't returning, and they were watching their sales in the afternoon, evenings. So they started with the morning, and what do they want to do? Well, we want to add something for them to eat. So they started with pastries. And after a while, realized that people were looking for an excuse to get breakfast, but they didn't want the coffee shop to smell like a breakfast place. Like McDonald's, you walk in, yes, you can smell coffee, but you can smell burgers and you can smell French fries and all this other stuff, right? But you would walk in the door instead, and now so they put an enormous amount of money and innovation in building what? The right oven to, 1, fit on a countertop, but 2, with air filters to filter out the burnt food smell. So now you only smelled coffee when you walked in the door. So you walked in the door, you got coffee, and now what'd you get? You got a breakfast sandwich. And then they started the STAR program, the incentive and the benefit program, where after so many drinks you would get a free beverage, right? And so what did that do? That meant that you would come in the morning, get breakfast and coffee, and then you would come back at lunchtime to get your free drink. And then because you were running this incredibly active, what did they start to do? They started to change their menu where they had wraps and things like that, and boxes, food boxes, et cetera, pre-prepped, some stuff coming fresh from local providers into those restaurants, into their box stores, so they didn't you take away for lunch. And if you decided you were going to go home in the evening and you didn't have kids, or you didn't have a spouse or a partner or whatever it was, or you're on your own for the evening, you could even stop by and pick up something on the way home, a wrap for dinner. So they're able to turn 1 morning cup of coffee transaction into an average of 3.4 transactions a day, which is why I had a $400 a month habit after a while buying from the same retailer, because they had me after the third visit. I was coming back no matter what. So they looked at what a primary indicator was. And first of all, and this is not new or innovation, but it is a must inside of a pandemic where our purchases, and right now the general populace's purchasing power is so much smaller with such a lack of income security, and just a lack of money in our marketplace right now, is that every client is incredibly important. And the moment you can not only regulate, but cause repeated buys because there's less transactions, you make up in volume by having the same person buy multiple times coming into the retailer. And then from there, by adding an innovation like app development or whatever, making it much simpler, much easier for people to buy, but changing the way they do the transaction now, of course. And Matt, I want your thoughts on this in a moment. Being able to get them to buy and purchase differently. Anything to do when they're sitting on the couch changes that transaction. Anything where you add to the quality of the experience coming into your end when you're sitting in your home from that retailer helps. And there are even both big and little box retailers now that went so far as one saying you can take the menu home. A notable steak joint in our marketplace started when they reopened their kitchen, same one I mentioned before, where they took about a 3-month hiatus. All of their high end cuts of steak, including everything it takes to prep a meal, right down to a bottle of wine. They prepackaged with videos and cooking instructions how to do it yourself. Do you have a broiler? Do you have a pan? Do you have a barbecue? Do you have a grill top? We will tell you how to cook this food to exactly the way you want it, so it's the same as when it comes out of the restaurant while you are at home. There's another big box retailer that not only started to do takeaway food, and they were reluctant to reopen their dining room for 5 months. They didn't reopen their dining room. What did they also add at the front of the pandemic? And they were closed for nearly 2 months before they started to take takeaway food. They started to provide a personal shopping service where you could go on their website, order dinner, and also order your groceries based off of their food supplier. So you could get milk and toilet paper and produce and meat and all these other different things, and you could put together, and they would box it up for you, and you would show up to pick up dinner and also take away groceries. So innovation has to come in the form of creativity, but there are a number of instances where, thanks to technology, thanks to apps, thanks to changing the way we do delivery service different, or the way we look at it, and the way we change transaction. If there's less money now, I don't want you to buy a breakfast sandwich and a coffee from me right now. I want you to buy a cup of coffee because I want you to come back for that free beverage in 3 days. Get one coffee from me every morning, but in 3 days, come back for your one free beverage in the afternoon. I'm creating a repetitive buy habit. And by knowing that I can walk in the door and pick up with a mask in our marketplace, or go through the drive-through and hand it out the window thanks to the app. So Matt, what else have you noted?
Well, and I just want to, I guess, reiterate that, and obviously Ali can speak to this more so than I, but frequency-based platforms is going to be key for everyone to win, right? So the ones like I just mentioned that are, I'm eating a specific brand 5 days a week now, and it's prepared for me. So there are two trains of thought there, and I had talked to them initially before they started this program. Is that, well, Matt, if we show people how to do it at home, they might not come back. And although very qualified, some things actually are quite easy to make at home. But most of us who are of the adult age and have had to been responsible for buying groceries and making our own food know that. It's not about that. It's about the community involvement, the relationships that you build, and having, a night out with friends and family. So I've always known that I could make a steak medium rare with baked potato at my house for X. It's never been about the cost. And maybe you had touched on this earlier today, Mitch, is that the fact that, someone's willing to buy a shake from one of these smoothie places at $7 and then be charged another $6 or $7 on top of that to, have it delivered through one of these third-party apps. And I want to maybe just share this with you. I remember I was at my fitness facility, my gym, pre-pandemic, and the instructor was there all day. And I just remember a skip the dish delivery guy walking in with one smoothie, and she had it literally hand delivered to her. She didn't have to break anything. She didn't have to worry about lunch. She didn't have to worry about this, that, and the other. She continued hour after hour to do all these things. So it's making people more efficient. But coming back to that is that it's not about price, because if she's willing to spend $15 for a shake for the convenience, you just need to be relevant. You need to be part of that frequency campaign that we talked about. And you need to make it easy enough to be, get it into my hands, their hands, and again, in the world of the pandemic, contactless, this, that, and the other. So Ali may be able to highlight that a little bit better. But, to me, it's really going to be about the companies and the individuals that are going to be top of mind at the local scale are really going to be able to come out of this when they're allowed to have 45 people in their restaurant or 90 people in their restaurant. I'll be the first ones there, and I'll be telling all my friends to meet me there when it's allowed, right? So thanks, Mitch.
So with that, we're going to go to innovation, technology, and one particularly attraction. So Ali's on the call right now. We're going to make sure to get him included this quickly. So brother, buckle up. You're going to be there. But two final thoughts, not thoughts. This is stuff you need to consider doing. One, and this is the best comparison analogy. If you've ever been to a shopping mall and you've ever walked into a food kiosk, or you've ever been to Vegas and walked to one of the food kiosks there, we are rapidly approaching the space and time where bigger box retailers, thanks to ghost kitchens, other things, etc., or shared spaces, literally are going to become pods of potentially two or three or four or five food retailers at the same time, same place. So you walk in the door knowing that I'm ordering off of the steak menu from this part of the kitchen over here, but I can also order off the sushi menu from this kitchen over here. And when I want dessert, it's going to come from the crepe place that also operates out of what used to be the salad bar, etc. That this is not new or innovative, but it's an impact or a change that we're looking to make right now. As well, when you look at that, because we're also making changes in footprint, like the pizza spinner, for example, or other retailers where what they're really doing is sitting with a handful of front of house staff to hand bags of food to people, whether they're innovative or not, whether it goes in styrofoam, shouldn't be doing that anymore, whether it goes in a cardboard box, or whether it goes into a well thought out, recyclable, reusable container that even includes a meat sponge to suck up juice that drips off of it so nothing gets soggy before your food comes home and stays piping hot as well comes out of the kitchen. That for this to work as well, it's also lowered the cost per transaction. The moment you change the cost of your overhead when it comes to footprint, staffing, and other things like that, it now means that your per ticket price or your per customer price point starts to reduce itself, which means to make the same money at the end of the day as you did before, you can have less transactions, less price on each of those transactions, and still have the same outcome for your business, which means that adoption and adaption also has to include the fact that it may never be the same volume of customers, volume of per ticket pricing that you had before. But if you're willing to adjust what you do right now with your business, the same profitability, more than anything else, the same cash flow can be had doing a lot less there. Now, innovation, attraction, technology. I'm going to spotlight Ali here as well. We're going to get his take on this because his business is one of the best when it comes to that inside of our marketplace. Ali, it's good to see you as always, brother. Season 2 Syndicate Talks. Let's get your thoughts on this right now. We got about 5 or 6 minutes left, even if we go an extra minute over. Got 5 or 6 minutes left. Let's talk about what it's going to take to attract more people, of course, keep them coming in, and with that as well, what we can do to make changes so that we can deliver same product, better results, better profitability.
Thank you, Mitch. Super excited to for the second season of Syndicate Talks. It's amazing to see how far we have came with the first season and second season. So guys, I'll keep it short. First thing is that what hospitality sector is going through, I think this is a blessing for them. When we go through hard times, that's where innovation comes in. That's where creativity comes out, right? So I think hospitality sector has to think about one thing that they were running on as I say, autopilot model. They were not thinking about innovation. Now all of a sudden the house burned down and they are like, okay, well, now we need to figure something out. So I think look at perspectively that I think hard times bring in innovation out. And a really good book I recommend everyone is by Seth Godin. It's called The Dip. The dip is the one which creates the high, not the high will creates the dip. So that's number one thing that I will tell whoever will be watching. Second thing is that go back to some of the base principles of marketing, positioning, right? Okay, are you just another burger joint among hundreds of burger joint, or you have created a market positioning? Market positioning, right? One of the good examples in Edmonton, we talk about woodshed burgers, right? Okay, expensive burger, as Matt said, it's not a lot of people think that it's price. If I price my burger at $12, people won't come. If I price my burger at $15, in fact, the more expensive it is, the better you will do. Because the perception, the narrative you are building in customers' head that this is a premium product, this is not just another product, right? So understand the concepts of scarcity, right? How you can play right now. Hey, you know what? We just make 30 pizzas. That's it every day. This is a special pizza we make, just 30. People will come to you, right? Another perspective is like, loyalty programs, right? Okay, Matt talked about repeat purchase behavior. I still don't see restaurants, hospitality industries have loyalty program in place, right? Okay, where is your loyalty program, right? Because default is one transaction from one person a month. If you move that to 5 transactions from the same customer, you don't need new customers. You need the same guy buying multiple times. So I think COVID has created, where it has created immense pressure, I genuinely think so that has created tremendous opportunities, and it will, now is the time that the brands who will work at it right now will be the winners of the next 2 years. We already know the last 2 quarters of the economy, we are seeing growth. ATB has already said that we are aiming for 4% GDP growth in Alberta for the last 2 quarters, right? Someone will going to eat that pie. Is it you or your next door neighbor? And if you are sitting on your ass and not doing anything, nothing will change. So just get up, right? Start moving, right? Start moving, start trying new things, right? There's hell lot of studies from successful QSR restaurants, fast food restaurants, dine-in places, how they have adopted and how they have changed, right? Okay, home-based meal kits, right? Reheat food. There's a hell lot of like innovation you can do. Just take away places, right? Renegotiating your leases, right? So there's, I think so that if you look at in the hindsight, this is the time where when you should be innovating, and I think this is the best time for hospitality industry to do that, to change things around. And one last thing I'll mention is like, your supply chain, right? We know that there's a huge movement towards sustainability, local. Have you changed your supply chain? Why the hell your burger is coming from south the border when you can buy the burger from Spruce Grove? And based on this one marketing tactic, I can promise you people will come to you because you are supporting a local business, right? If you build the right narrative in people's head, people are sitting on the biggest discretionary funding in their bank accounts. We know that. There is money in the pockets. Who they are giving it to, you have to give them a good, compelling reason to give it to you. Right. Mitch?
Ali, thank you very much, brother. So, to summarize for today and to get everybody back onto the world, by the way, where we're sitting today right now, and this is our only live plug we'll ever get in because normally they don't stack up quite like this. In just over an hour, we're going to be having Canada's largest speed networking event going to be hitting right now. If you're watching live on YouTube right this second, you need to go to syndicate.org, scroll down to our events, and click on the obviously today's date speed networking event. We had people from Africa, all over the US. We have people from Australia. We've had people from Japan. We've people from all over Europe come in and join us for a speed networking event in Canada. So it's extraordinary. Come and join us there. So to summarize very quickly, one, do not hesitate right now to have a good look at what's going on with your menu. Kill that stuff that makes no sense. Two, go ahead and take a look at the way you're doing stuff inside of when it comes to your kitchen as well. Look to make some innovations. Three, look at the way you deliver, provide, share, or otherwise give your product to other people, etc., and make that change and that impact so that they can enjoy what you've got in a very different way in an environment that may or may not change anytime soon, which means you want to make sure your product goes home with them well and that they can enjoy it so that they're looking to come back. Four, incentivize them to come back. Get them to come back because loyal customers, while they might be spending less, while they might not come as frequently, are going to end up buying more in the long term. So client retention is desperately important. Number five, look at your facility. If you can make a change and adjustment in your facility expenses, etc., adjust your lease, negotiate it, whatever it is, get a utility broker, get your utilities to drop down, etc. Talk to your employees, look at job sharing, etc., things like this. That's a better way to do it. Get a ghost kitchen happening. Launch your own secondary line of food. Get somebody else to come in and share your space. Share with another restaurant. Go to another restaurateur if you're a local one. Say, listen, I will split my kitchen down the middle. We'll figure out how to make this work in the middle. We can even use the same kitchen staff, whatever it is. Let's get 2 kitchens operating at one place. And later in the future, we're just going to split the dining room down the middle, right? It's not the first time this has ever happened. How do I know that? Another major coffee retailer in Canada used to split it with a sandwich place all the time. Every one of their coffee locations had a sandwich shop, literally. You would walk in, there'd be almost like a divider, but it wasn't a wall down the middle where booze and tables on one half were coffee, the other half was sandwiches, but you could go order a cup of coffee, then go order a sandwich and sit anywhere you wanted to in the restaurant. It was fantastic and innovative. They made great sandwiches. They had a great cup of coffee. It was a beautiful thing to behold. Find a way to change what's going on. Adopt technology and then market the ever living hell out of your business. Because if it's not you, somebody else will take what is a squeezed market share right now. And when the market starts to improve, they will have already eaten you. Yes, that's a food service pun for food service businesses, and you'll be gone. Or you're not only the next one standing, but you're the one that's thriving and growing in a changed market. On behalf of our live studio audience that was here today, my co-host, my brother from another mother, Matt Hewson, our other one, Ali Salmon, has already bounced off, and for our live audience that was here and those that get to watch it in the future, thank you for joining us in hospitality in 2021 and beyond. I am your host, Mitch Cavendish, the Savage in Business. This is a Syndicate Talks Season 2. We got a couple more episodes coming just in this season. Keep watching for this as well. And join us at syndicate.org. We're happy to share this information, and we give it to you free of charge to make you and your business better. We have other resources for you as well. Come and join us. Take part in them. Of course, get to know us. Keep running your business. Do what you've got to do, not just to get by right now, but to innovate, thrive, and grow. And I promise you, your business will improve because of us. Thank you for joining us.